before I start talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and the concepts behind them in general, I would like to start with something which we all can relate to, which is the way banking system works and the way our current currency works. So two things. Yeah. Yeah. So we have currency. So different countries have different currencies, and we have our banking system. So one example is, so let's say if I want to transfer £100 from my account to your account, so what are the steps? So I open my Barclays bank account, then I select you, and then I transfer my money, and then I ask this transaction to the bank. Then what the bank does is it checks that okay, I have enough money in my bank account, and I really am the one who is sending it. So there is some authentication in place. So random persons can't transfer on my behalf. Only I can transfer on my behalf. And then they do the transaction, and then they give me a confirmation. So that's the way current system works. So there are certain properties of this system. So one is the most important property is the fact that all my money is stored with the bank, and the I sort of trust the bank that it maintains all the records. So it maintains that how much transaction I have done in the past, and this verification, the authentication, all of these things. So this is like highly centralized because bank is the only single source of truth in this case. And there is one more aspect, which is the fact that it is now electronic. So we have electronic centralized system currently in place. And we are dealing with current fiat currencies like US dollar or pounds, etc. So that has another set of properties. So one of them is that it is controlled usually by the government or the Reserve Bank. So they have pretty much full control over it. So it's not like the people get to dictate terms about how the currency is going to evolve. So one obvious example is, so last year we had COVID and a lot of people needed money. So what government basically did, okay, government didn't have enough money to send it out. So basically what they did is not very different than actually printing money out of nowhere, basically. So right now there is 30 to 40% more US dollars compared to like 1 or 2 years ago. So what that leads to is inflation because the supply of all of our assets has not increased, but the supply of the currency has increased. So that leads to inflation, and that decision is like centralized. The government takes that decision, the banks take the decision. We don't take the decision. So that is one aspect of it, which is inflation. And the fact that this is also centralized, and how much of currency has to be in circulation. There is no cap on it. We can print, we can continue printing as much as we want. So there is no cap on it. So unlimited supply. Okay, so these are the current systems, current currency, and their corresponding properties. So something similar happened in 2008 as well. So when there was another financial crisis around that time, and it became very clear that with this current system, it's not good for people in general. So this has been recognized in the past that what we really want is something not very centralized, possibly, hopefully electronic, and yeah, not inflationary. So either constant supply or deflationary. So there is one alternative in place, alternative to cash, let's say, in the form of gold. So we have gold, which is not necessarily centralized because a lot of people have gold and people can't simply take out gold out of thin air. You still have to mine gold. So in a way, it is fairly limited.
And how
Um,
about the real estate? Is it centralized?
yeah, that is also one other good example.
Mm.
So, but real estate is it also varies from place to place. Like, okay, one example is let's say currently at one particular place there is a real estate boom, but then maybe government decides, okay, no, we will move the market from there. So all of a sudden the price can drop in a way, or they can also have another impact. They can increase the price up by shifting a market to a particular place. So it's not as decentralized as one may think. Gold is probably more decentralized in a way that it is distributed across the whole world. So one single government cannot like have a huge influence on it. But the only problem with gold is, or one of the problems is that it's physical. So I can't really send you gold that easily. So electronic counterpart is useful, more useful because that is you can easily transfer values. So that is
And the
one thing.
banking
Yeah.
system is also electronic. It is just,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, within the electronic, there is this notion of how much security you have.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I kind of remember that the blockchain technology is based on this crypto, like encryption, and
Yeah.
people have different degrees of, like people devise different
Yeah,
degrees
I'll
of
come to that. We're just talking about the current system right now. So yeah, as you said, the banking system has electronic property, but it is centralized, and you kind of have to trust it. So you have to trust the bank. So is there a way where we have a currency or a value which is electronic? We don't really need trust on anything, and it is decentralized. So we don't have to trust one single entity. It can be distributed. The trust can be distributed over a multitude of entities. So that is one of the requirements. So when basically computers started arriving, 60s or 70s, so people had this idea that okay, let's have electronic cash system in some way or the other. So and
like PayPal and
yeah, yeah, and also in a decentralized way because people have been thinking about this from 60s, 70s. It's not a very recent concept, but that idea of electronic and decentralized that has its problems. So one of the problems is verification. That so the problem with electronic items is that let's say if I have a JPEG image or something, I can easily copy it to make multiple stuff out of it. That is one thing. That is called double spending. I'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
So I can, if I were to send a picture to you, I can send the same picture to somebody else. So, but that does not work for a cash. Like if I'm sending to you, I should be only sending that to you. The same amount I should not be sending to somebody else. That is one problem. The other problem is verification. So if I'm sending a transaction, it has to be verified. It has to be easily verifiable that I am sending on my behalf. Nobody else is sending on my behalf. So in case of current banking system, it is more straightforward because bank does the verification for me. But in case of a decentralized system, where at its core there are
and I mean, the notion that bank will verify it for you, it's not just very simple because, for example, in the case of Vijay Mallya, you know, like bank verifying.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's also true. Yeah, it is. That's the problem with centralization. So if a bank decides to give a lot of money to Vijay Mallya, nobody is stopping them, or they do their own verification, which may or may not be perfect, which may or may not be transparent. So that is another issue with one single centralized entity doing all this stuff. So these are two problems, two important problems.
But I have a question. So
Yeah.
the notion of centralized system and decentralized system,
Yeah.
how historic does it go? How historic does it go in the sense like to DCs to
Oh no, it's like 80s maybe, 70s or 80s. That's when they started actually thinking about having a decentralized system because before the computers were there, how exactly would you do electronic decentralized system?
Would there be other ways to uh, have the decentralized system, which is not electronic, which is not based on computers?
Yeah, then it's physical, like in a way like gold is, right? So,
Mm.
but that is physical. That's the issue. I can't send gold to somebody sitting in India instantly. That's an
Mm.
issue, right?
Mm.
It is highly localized. Its application is fairly localized in a way.
Mm. Mm.
Even though I may preserve its value,
Mm.
and even though it's pretty much a universal language, okay, everybody recognizes gold, everybody
Mm.
acknowledges the acknowledges that gold is very
Mm.
like has certain value.
Mm.
It is still the transaction is a bottleneck, the quickness of transaction. Yeah, so that's why having value or currency in electronic form is useful because
Mm.
it can be fast, the transaction can
Mm.
be fast.
Mm.
I mean, the thing with decentralization is it's not that we want decentralization for the sake of decentralization.
Mm.
It's more about taking control from one single entity and having that trust,
Mm.
which I have on the bank.
Mm.
I still need to keep that trust, no matter
Mm.
what sort of system I use,
Mm.
decentralized or not.
Interesting.
If I was 100% trusting the bank, then this
Interesting.
probably won't be an issue. Or if I was 100% trusting the government, then it's
Interesting.
fine. But
Interesting.